If I want to build at the scale and level of impact and the quality that I want to create at, I need resources and I need experience and I need a team. Entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs because you're great at doing 10 roles without realizing you're doing 10 roles. This is the thing that is unhirable and what makes me special. I always knew that I wanted to start my own thing.
Jess, it is so exciting to have you here on the Untapped podcast today. Welcome to the studio. And I would love to give you a minute or two just to introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little bit about who is Jess and what is she creating in the world.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to record this in person. So I'm Jess. I'm the founder and CEO of Longplay and Backbone. Longplay is a full-service retention marketing agency for direct-to-consumer e-commerce brands. So we typically handle email, SMS, and all types of retention marketing to help e-commerce brands keep their customers. So Longplay's been around for 4.5, almost 5 years now. So it's been a while, working with brands anywhere from pre-revenue up to 500 million in annual revenue. And we have a team of about 25 to 30 people, fully remote. And then we also recently launched Backbone, which is our kind of lower tier service, but also software company for e-commerce brands as well. So that's been the newest venture. And before that, I was a chief marketing officer of a direct-to-consumer e-commerce brand as well. So that's kind of how I got into the space.
Nice. Amazing. So we're excited to be able to dive into this conversation today around entrepreneurship and being a leader and growing a team from, solopreneur into leadership. You really inspire me just in your openness, your willingness to be honest about, what's going on in business and how you're going personally. And I think since our friendship and meeting, we've had so many good conversations around what does it mean to be a leader? What is the challenges of the entrepreneurial journey? So that's basically what we're going to be jamming on today and sharing with you guys because, we really want to bring this kind of behind the scenes conversation that we've been having. And Jess has so many cool philosophies. So let's talk a little bit about, so with Longplay brands and, Backbone and things, you obviously went from working basically on your own into building a team of 25, which is, not a small team either. And so I'm curious, how was the initial transition for you? When did you know it was time to grow? And what kind of challenges did you first meet when you thought, okay, well, I've built, something that's obviously working and it's time to scale up?
Yeah. So the path for me was I actually kind of started as a marketing assistant at this D2C ecom brand, became their CMO, was there for about 3.5 years. And kind of near the tail end, I always knew that I wanted to start my own thing. But there wasn't necessarily I never put together a business plan. There was not a, step-by-step game plan on what I was going to do here. But I remember there was a drive where I was like, why aren't there any agencies that specialize in email marketing? And then probably 2 or 3 weeks later, I was at an event and someone was talking to me and they're like, how do you can you just walk me through what you do for marketing at Best Self Co, which was the company at the time. So I was just kind of giving them literally a live tutorial at an event. And a little while later, they emailed me. They're like, that was great. Could I pay you for some consulting? Said yes. And then eventually it was like, hey, this is great, but we kind of just need someone to do it for us. So said yes. So really, I always say the beginning of the business, and this is how I think businesses should be built, is you find the demand first and you can back into the business model, the positioning, all of those things afterwards. Because at the end of the day, your business exists to provide value and solve a problem for a customer. And so in the beginning of Longplay, which wasn't even Longplay, it was just kind of me freelancing. I was still working full time as a CMO. And I just said yes to literally everything that I felt like I could do. So in the beginning, it was I did some email marketing, did some content marketing, wrote a book, did some branding, literally did everything. At this point, I probably had 3 to 5 clients across the board, and eventually became clear that email was the one that was kind of getting the most requests. And then I started building infrastructure around it. I'm like, okay, there's actually something scalable here in a way that branding is a little bit harder to scale. Content marketing is a little bit harder to scale. So email was something I was already offering, but the decision was to kind of niche down on that and kind of say no to everything else. So that was kind of one of the big decisions, mostly from just seeing how customers were responding. And I was probably handling 3 to 5 clients on my own with a virtual assistant, still doing full time as a chief marketing officer. So that was the best time from a cash flow and freedom standpoint, I was working long hours, but like if you're just optimizing for like pure cash flow, full-time job with a handful of clients and like a VA to support, like that is the way to go. And you can just chill at that level, if that's what you want to build. But for me, I always knew like again, I wanted to kind of build my own team and build my own company. So I left, I think when for me, it was really kind of at this point where I felt like I learned everything I needed to learn at the ecom company. And the team was still amazing. Everything was still great, but like I just kind of like got bored. And at the same time, Longplay was starting to take off. So at this point, we were like, had 5 to 7 clients. Like there was clearly demand here. I had one VA. I think I started hiring a copywriter, designer. So at this point, I still had like 3 or 4 vendors working with me part time while I was still doing a full-time job. And that was kind of the crux of leaving. It was like, I can feel demand is like pushing the ceiling and I'm bored and there's way more to learn, you know, with moving to doing my own thing. And I really had this feeling of if I'm going to fail, I want to fail on my own terms was kind of the feeling. So that was kind of when I left. And at that point, I think we had like 5 to 7 clients. I had like 3 to 5 people working underneath me already. I don't believe it was full time yet at that time. I think it was basically 3 to 5 part-time people. And that was the inflection point.
Amazing. I think you touched on so many good things there, like actually creating, experimenting with things, finding the demand, and then building from there. It's incredible how many people spend so much money on a brand and like, everything for marketing. And then you're like, oh, cool. Who's the customer? And like, have you sold something to them? And they're like, oh, no. And you're like, okay. So I think that's a really good philosophy for people who may be listening and in that transition or that early stage is to just experiment, like you said, and try a whole bunch of things and then see where the demand actually fell.
Yeah.
And the other really important point, you go.
Sorry, and also to kind of add to that exactly, just to kind of give people something to anchor to. I didn't have a website until we had like 5 to 7 clients. All my offers were like, I wrote my own contracts, like it was coming out of a Google Doc. And then I think when I finally launched my own website, built it on Squarespace in like literally 30 minutes, and like it was stock imagery. I'm pretty sure there were still pages with like the lorem ipsum like placeholder, and that got us to like $1 million in revenue.
Yes.
So it is. I always love that philosophy of like if you're not embarrassed by it, like you launch too late.
I love it.
And I think that's the mindset, especially in the beginning.
I love that. Yeah, couldn't agree more. That's definitely aligns with what we're always promoting. And I think it makes people feel uncomfortable. I think it makes them feel vulnerable. It brings up all your perfectionism, but it is kind of that you just got to get out there and start, and it can be messy. And yeah, that's a good mantra. And you said, I think something else you touched on, which is interesting, is this kind of idea that, you were working full time, you had a few clients. I really love that as a philosophy. It's like get some momentum and then transition. And I did exactly the same with Untapped and always recommend that. I think the other way is, relatively stressful, just having nothing and then, suddenly needing clients. So that was also, you touched on, you had this desire to build something of your own. And I guess I'm curious, when you actually said like, because I know when you've got the full-time job, you've got a few clients, you've got a VA, you have a lot of personal freedom because no one relies on you. You're not paying anyone's bills. You're not, it's just you and you're kind of cash cow making it. And I think what you said is powerful. You don't have much time though. So I'm curious for you, when you actually decided, okay, yeah, I don't want to keep doing this structure. What do you think it was? Was it a desire to like grow as a person? Like what led you to be like, I'm going to give up some freedom? Because I think when you step into hiring a team, you give up freedom, right? You suddenly have to pay people's bills and have more responsibility. And so I'm curious, what mindset shift did you have to make when you went through that specific piece around, I'm going to let go of some of this cash, I'm going to let go of some of this freedom and actually build something? And what inspired you to do that?
What a great question. I think for me, I've always actually resonated more with the idea of being an artist than an entrepreneur. And I kind of see, especially now, like I see each business kind of like an album release, right? So it's like one album does not make an entrepreneur, does not make an artist. It is the span of all these album releases that make a career. And I see my business the same way where I'm like, Longplay is like my first release. And like, that was my debut. Like, I'm like, I can do it, prove that I can do it. Backbone is the next one, and everything will continue growing. But really looking at this like kind of longer time horizon. But because of that, everything has always been fueled by this deep desire to create. I remember early on, I kind of essentially put together like a super high level vision direction of my life game plan. It always ended with nonprofit education and a path to get there. And I really saw business as this process of, if I want to build at the scale and the level of impact and the quality that I want to create at, I need resources and I need experience and I need a team. For me, business has really always been this process of kind of like gathering Lego pieces. And I kind of saw it as like the first bit was like, ooh, I got a few Lego pieces. I can build, like, I got 3 pieces. I can build like a little mountain. And then when you start building the next thing, you get more team members. You're like, yeah, like I unlocked like the Princess Castle package. And now I get to unlock like the starship, like this, like 1,000 pieces. And like, look at this cool thing I can build. So a lot of the process for me in entrepreneurship is like gathering more Lego pieces. And part of that is experience, part of that is money, part of that is team resources, whatever. So for me, that has always been the core fuel of like, I just want to keep building. I want to build cooler things. And to build cooler things, you got to build the first thing first.
Beautiful. I love that metaphor of the Lego. It's like, yeah, I want the princess castle. That's so good. And yeah, for sure, I think that's a really good way to think about it. Versus thinking, okay, it's going to be more responsibility and more stressful and more burden, which I think a lot of people have this perception of. It's like, actually, it's going to free up my time. It's going to give me more resources to unlock the princess castle and, the new kind of Lego creations, and you can build better things. So it's beautiful.
Exactly. And I think what you kind of touch on too is a big part of entrepreneurship is like you get the freedom to choose your problems, but the problems don't stop. And so I think that shift in mindset is important as people scales. Like, do you want to choose the problem of you have to deal with clients hands-on and you might need to be on call sometimes, but you have a lot more time and freedom and you don't have as many responsibilities, and that's great. Or do you want to choose the problem of I'm responsible for a team of 25, I'm responsible for payroll, I'm responsible for their families, but I don't have the problem of having to deal hands-on with clients. I don't have the problem of, having to like suddenly jump on and do something last minute because we have a team for that. But like the problems don't go away. And in some ways it gets heavier. But for me, I'm like, I choose the problem of long-term problems, bigger problems, heavier responsibility over the problems of short-term reactivity. And that's just a personal choice. There's no good or bad. It's just a personal choice.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to frame that, and so relevant. It's like you get to choose your problems, choose better problems. And I also think we get addicted a little bit to the cycle of the same problems. And, there's a really good quote around like you can do the same year 10 times and it'll have no growth because, some people are actually just looping on the same problems in business, the same patterns in their life. And so when you take on going from solopreneur to a team, you really do choose such a new set of problem and like expand yourself into a whole new identity, which is the growth game of entrepreneurship, right? That's kind of the fun of the whole thing. It's also the challenge of it all. But so when you made that, what do you think was your biggest identity shifts you had to undergo? You're stepping into leadership, things had to change. Maybe some of the mistakes would be really helpful as well, because I think we mentioned this earlier, but people don't talk about that a lot. It's always like, look at me now. This is my hero transformation story. But like, what were some of the ugly bits? What are some of the mistakes you made stepping into leadership?
Oh my gosh, so many mistakes. So, and I think one of the core theme that you kind of touched on that I think we align on the most is this idea of you can either do the hard work or you can do the hard work. And I think a lot of people escape the true hard work of entrepreneurship, the true hard work of stepping into a leadership position and doing the identity shifts by escaping through quote unquote hard work, which is like grinding, long hours. Like, let me just do more of the thing versus, oh, all of these fires you're putting out is because you're avoiding the hard work of firing someone or having an uncomfortable conversation or doing the inner work. So I think a lot of the identity shifts, a lot of the mistakes in leadership was realizing like I was avoiding the true hard work of like looking inwards, tapping into a different channel of growth and really challenging myself and escaping through it and like, churning through people or like avoiding uncomfortable conversations and micromanaging, all that type of thing. So I'd say like early on, the first biggest lesson was kind of when I had a team of like probably 7 people and I was like hands-on managing everyone. Everyone was full-time at that point. I was really struggling to figure out boundaries and the difference between mentorship, management, and leadership. And as an individual with friends, I'm like, I will sit with you for 3 hours, however long you need me. I am here for you. Like, I can hold space. I want to know you as a human and like know your soul and like let's have all the conversations. And then on the flip side, when I'm looking at business, I'm actually very cut and dry, where I'm just, here's what needs to be produced. Here's what needs to get done. Like, is this thing working? And I really look at business like a machine. But management and leadership is like the blending of those two elements of like, how do you operationalize a business? And you kind of need to see each part of a business like a machine. And also, how do you bring the humanness into it? And in my mind, mentorship, management, and leadership is basically just different, is a spectrum of how much you lead, right? So mentorship is like a little bit more human, a little bit less machine. Leadership is a little bit less machine, or a little bit more machine, a little bit more human. Management is kind of like 50-50. And I have learned over the years, I'm terrible at management. I need to stay out of it. I don't enjoy it. And my team deserves good managers. And that is not me. So let's just be honest about that. But I think initially when you're small, you can't get out of it. And I think for me, I was really flip-flopping between the two. So I would go from, hey, this is just what needs to get done. This is the output. Like, this is what these are the deliverables. And then when they get stressed, I'm like, oh my God, how are you? Like, how can I hold space for you? And also, how can I take things off your plate? Versus learning to balance both simultaneously in every moment. I think that was kind of one of the biggest lessons. That's still to this day a work in progress. And I think now I have the luxury and freedom of just removing myself from management and focusing on leadership. But that is a challenging lesson.
I really like the distinctions. I really love that because it's actually interesting you say that. I actually have only ever had the distinctions of management and leadership. And putting mentorship in there is really, really powerful distinction, because I always used to say like, yeah, management, I'm also horrific. And management, I'm like, oh, you didn't do your job, or like, what's happening on the project? Like, yeah, terrible at it. And I think being able to admit that is so powerful as well. And the mentorship's really interesting, because personally as a coach, like I love mentoring and I love creating a vision and then leading people to become their better selves. But that bit in the middle is so messy. But yeah, I think that real power of mentorship, management, leadership. What would you say? So mentorship is obviously caring about that human, understanding them deeply, creating the space for that depth in a team. Management is obviously that more kind of bit more clinical, operationalized system. What does leadership mean for you?
Leadership to me is about direction, setting the tone, and creating the container.
Nice.
So leadership is, do we know where we're going? What's the path? Like, one, where are we going? Why are we going there? And how will we get there? High level. Like, what's the path? And let's make sure, like, I always have this mental image of like everyone being in this, those like dragon racers or dragon boat racers where it's like you have to like like you're paddling at the same time as you have this drum beat. So to me, leadership is, this is the boat. I built the boat. We have a river. I found the river. This is the direction we're going. And I found all the people to like, we know we need like 20 people for this boat, and we need a drum person. You might not be the person even finding the person who is rowing, but you know that you need like 20 of them. So that's kind of like, you're making this thing exist. And then you also are responsible for like creating the container. So a lot of culture building is, I think a lot of entrepreneurs underestimate the challenge of culture building, because you think you can just Google Doc some core values and like do a few core calls every once in a while. But culture is infused, and like values are infused in every single conversation that's happening, every single interaction, how people are being managed, when boundaries are being set, what is okay, what is not okay. So true culture is executed through management, but it's leadership's responsibility to set the container for that and set the tone for that, and also create the container for those values to exist. So it's like, you can preach transparency all you want, but if you're not creating the container where it's safe for someone to be transparent, then like that transparency is not going to happen.
I agree.
So I think those are the big ones. And then setting the tone, which is like, you need to embody it, you need to live by it. And I think when you're setting company values, they cannot be aspirational. They have to be what you are currently embodying. You cannot ask anyone to do what you are not willing to do.
Agree. And I think, and it's once you know that mission, right? It's like, well, this is where we're going. it's like, what kind of company do we need to be to achieve that as well? And that brings out that really I think that brings out that highlight around like what's actually critical to the company's mission as well, right? And I think it's really interesting the combination between the founder's values and the business values and where they merge, because what you hit there was so powerful. It's like, as a founder or creator, you have to be congruent in what you're creating and asking others to, stand in. And it is so led from the top down. And yeah, it's sad to see how many people just put some values in a doc and think that'll do it. It's like, it's you, the visionary, who sets the tone. Do you have any thoughts on what, because, it's a big part of what we do with our students as well, is helping them set those values and really create that kind of entire brand identity around them. But for you, what is the difference between your kind of core values, your evolution, and Longplay brand company values? And how do you discern those?
Man, I feel like this in itself is like
it's a whole episode.
It's a whole thing. It's a whole episode. So I guess two things that kind of come up. One is I want to talk about the mistakes around values, because I think at some point I'm really bought into and I'm really aligned with this idea of leadership is service. Like true leadership should be of service, and you have to embody everything that you're asking your team or your company to represent. That being said, there's a way to do this that is like growth oriented, and then there's a way to do this that's actually like very micromanagey, and you're just guilt doing it. So I think for me it was like, hey, I need to be a leader. I need to like be in the trenches with my team and like show them I can do it too. So now I'm like doing like the lowest tier work, or working these long hours for the sake of it, to do the thing, to show that I can like grind it out too. But like that's not in service of the company, and that's not in service of the team, because like the company needs me to be leading. So I think finding that balance of how do you embody the values, but in your role. Like a CEO's role is different from like a frontline team member role. So what does transparency look like embodied in your frontline team member, like a designer or a copywriter? What does transparency look like embodied in a CEO? So the values should be the same, but the behavior is actually slightly different because they're two different jobs. So I think that's an important distinction to make, because I was literally just then trying to do all this grunt work out of guilt, which doesn't work. And I think the other, I was doing it for like literally like 2 years. Before my wonderful CEO, Rachel, she was like, "What are you doing? This is not it." And I'm like, "Okay, well, this is amazing," because I didn't like it. She's like, "You don't like it. The team doesn't like it. It's not good for the business." No one is winning here. Like no one is winning here. Like
also, it's really funny when you're doing stuff that's like you're actually really bad at that. Like you're actually making the whole process worse. Like I'm lucky I always have Delaney mirroring that to me. He's like, yeah, maybe you should just get out of that. It's like it's literally, and I think. And it's so good for you, like, as you were saying earlier, is like, what is really that work with the capital W, like that inner work? And it's realizing what wounded part of me is continuing to try and add value or be perceived to be doing work and to be worthy because I'm hustling or grinding. It's like, that's then the bit as a CEO or a founder you have to then face off with. It's like, wow, I'm actually messing with my team's flow. I'm like disrupting everything by trying to be helpful. It's like, it's such
it's all your own ego, it's like this is not in service of anybody. So I think that's an important distinction. I think the other thing is I kind of see like when you build a business, like when I think about Longplay, like I built that business and established its culture, established its foundations when I was like 22, 23. So, and then now I'm 27. So I'm like, I've grown since then. And, but the company does not grow at the same pace as an individual, nor should it. And your team is not going to grow at the same pace as an individual. So then you create this funny alignment thing. And I think at some point, like I was going through this process of like, I've outgrown this company. I have nothing to learn here. Like, and then kind of hating it. And then also flipping back the other way of like trying to get the company to like mirror me. And that was also in some ways an ego thing. I think how I see it now is like, same as like music, right? Same as music albums. It's like, oh, this is a representation and encapsulation of me at that time and the values. And like my core values are still the same. So there's still a lot of resonance. But yeah, there's going to be philosophies that I live by right now that are not like directly mirrored in the business, but the underlying like theme of it is still the same. And really seeing the company as like, this was this beautiful entity that was created when I was 23 that is on its own journey now and has its own culture, its own team, its own vision, its own values. And its own like growth path, and I am here to nurture it like a child. And I still steer. I'm still going to teach it the right values, but a child is not expected to grow in this exact same growth path or at the exact same speed as you as an individual. I think that distinction is really important to make. If you want to
Amazing.
separate if you want to separate the business from yourself.
I agree 100%. I couldn't agree more. And I went through the same thing about 3 or 4 years into Untapped. And then it was like, I went on this huge journey, like a more spiritual journey, my own kind of personal evolution with feminine energy and things. And I kept trying to like fuse it all into the business when Untapped as a brand is actually a very structured, very systematic process, amazing accountability processes and stuff for our students, like getting results in different ways. And it created this like whole tension for myself and for the team and even, for our students and things. It was like, wait, is that where we're going? So I think what you just hit is so important. And I think for anyone who's maybe in that transition will provide so much kind of support to just know like, oh, I can be evolving in my own way. One thing I found, I'd be curious what you found helpful. I found it really helpful to actually, like at that point, I actually split off Untapped was a real mirror of me originally. It was like Untapped with Bryony. And then when I went through that transition, I like really split off the company brand and I even created my own kind of, Instagram and stuff again, like my own stuff. Because I think what happened for me, and maybe this is more feminine energy, but I didn't know where to express myself because my business had always been such an expression for me originally. And then I was like, okay, well, I don't know. I don't want to communicate like that as much anymore. So like, where do I go? And yeah, I wonder if there's anything that helped you in that, because for me, it was so small, but it was literally like setting up my own Instagram again, which I hadn't had in years.
100%. I think you touch on some really important points, which is like in the beginning of launching a business, you have it is you, right? Like at some point, it's literally just you. Like it's just you as one person.
It is,
but also like emotionally, it is all of you, and you have to put all of yourself into it. And then there's this like extraction process. And in my mind, I was calling it this process of like learning to break up with your business and like redefine the relationship. And I think with the separation process, I think about it a lot of like a healthy relationship with your business is very similar to like parent and child in the sense where like you don't want to like project yourself onto this child. Like you don't want to try to live all of your dreams vicariously through this like entity. Like it's not fair to your team. That's not what they signed up for. Like they're not here for you to live vicariously through them. Hey, you're in service of them. So that's like thing number one. And then the other piece of it is like, finding who you are again without the business. And I think that was a very emotionally taxing process. And a lot of it literally came from this idea of like, at some point I was so stressed. I was like, I just need to shut this thing down. Like just burn it to the ground. I can't and there's nothing to do with how great the team was or how great the company was or like how we were servicing our clients. It was just like how like involved I was like emotionally. So in my mind, I really had to go like, hey, mentally, if I shut down this business, who am I still as me? Because my identity was so wrapped up in it. And going through that mental process, like at no point did I actually try to shut down the business anyway. This was all like an emotional process. But like, hey, if this thing was gone, who am I still? And then that I think that emotional practice was huge for finding out who Jess was again, and then finding out who Longplay was again. And then from there, we can separate other brands because now through the separation, Longplay can have its own branding, that I can have my own branding. And I did the same thing where I'm like, launched my personal website, had a Longplay's website, like launched my Twitter, and I was like, Twitter is like, oh, this is like my space now. Like Twitter is where I can like dump all the things that do not make sense in an email marketing, retention marketing agency. No one needs to know my life philosophical views when we're talking about retention marketing, but I want to share it. And that comes out through my personal brand.
Amazing. Speaking of Twitter, where can people go find Jess Chan's personal brand?
Twitter is Jess Chan with 2 J's in the handle. And I do my Diary of an Entrepreneur series there, which is just all the stream of consciousness, ups and downs of like the human experience of entrepreneurship. But that's where I spend most of my time these days.
Yeah, and I can confirm I'm an avid follower and I love the daily updates. It's like the real detail behind the scenes, And I think people are done with flashy, just like basic kind of Instagram carousels that add no value. The diary, that you're creating. It really is literally like the breakdown of your day and what you're learning and what you're processing. And yeah, so can confirm, head over and follow because it's a good read. That's awesome. So looking back, I think attachments, right? You hit it so perfectly. It's like, I think basically one of my coaches said years ago, he was like, basically every single problem in your business could possibly come down to an attachment, like an issue with attachment to you. And I really like that you gave the parent-child example. It's like at some point you need to kind of expand out and go do your own thing as well. And I think there's so many small things people can do, like having your own personal brand or even creating your own company SOP manual and stuff when people are really early. We recommend that because we're like, it shouldn't be you. It does need to be an entire system that can operate without you as well. And there's all these kind of micro things people can do to really create their entity powerfully. And I think at the same time, maybe not go through so much of the kind of tumultuous enmeshment that you and I went through. Is there anything else you'd add to that you would have done that would have given the company its own kind of standing earlier? We talked about team, culture, values. I know you're a systems geek. So is there anything you'd want to add on that? Because you talked about like the business has got to be a machine, right? But yeah, curious, how do you think about that?
I think with the combination of team and systems, I think one of the biggest mistakes or challenges that entrepreneurs run into in delegating and building a team. So I think there's kind of one of few steps, right? There's first off, you have to hire, but then you have to learn how to delegate, and then you have to learn how to operationalize, and then you have to learn how to manage. And they're actually like separate parts of building a team. It's not just like you can't just hire a bunch of people, and you also can't just delegate, because if you just delegate, it's never a machine. You're just firing off individual tasks. So I think that's an important concept to kind of know that there's a few different steps there. The other thing that I see a lot of entrepreneurs make where they get stuck is in the process of delegation, you forget that you're actually wearing multiple hats. So they try to delegate. It's like, I'm doing marketing. Cool, I'm going to hire someone to take over marketing. It's like, no. You're actually doing branding and marketing and social media and content writing. So you actually have 4 roles here. And you're not setting anyone up for success when you try to hire someone to replace this entire chunk of work that you're doing. So for me, it was like, hey, I'm doing email marketing. I'm servicing the client. So I'm going to hire an email marketer to replace, my work with this client. Our team now has 4 or 5 different departments to replace what I was doing as a single person. And that's not because our team is incredible, but that's just what
it's because you were doing 10 roles.
Entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs because you're great at doing 10 roles without realizing you're doing 10 roles. So it's a lot of like double-edged sword stuff. So I think that's one thing, number one. Second thing is entrepreneurs not being aware of what things are their superpowers, and you start trying to delegate your superpower too quickly. So for me, like I didn't realize that relationship building and just just interacting with people and high-level strategy, I didn't realize how good I was at it, and that even just me saying that like has taken like so many years of inner work to like admit that I'm good at this.
Oh my
thing.
God.
But I'm like, I didn't realize I was good at those things. So I'm like, I can just hire someone for client management. I can just hire someone for strategy without realizing like this is my superpower. This is the thing that is unhireable and what makes me special. So like let's hire for everything else. So I think that part's really important. And the third piece is not setting realistic expectations. So there's this ongoing joke like with Rachel, my COO. She's like, okay, how long do you think, like when we're building a new system, like how long do you think this thing is going to take? I'm like, an hour? She's like, okay, so 10. And we just literally automatically multiply whatever estimate I have of anything by like 3 to 10x, depending on the thing.
I love it. D does times by pi. So I love that you're a 10x.
Yeah, it's just multiply it by something because you're probably wrong. Or like, how long do you think it's going to take for someone to onboard and like learn this thing? You're like 3 days. It's like, okay, so like 3 months. Like setting expectations, and like I've learned that I am not the person to set expectations. So I'm mostly just like, here's what needs to get done. You guys, however long you guys think it takes is reasonable. Like I trust you, like with my team. But I think those are the 3 biggest mistakes: is 1, not realizing what your superpower is; 2, trying to delegate multiple hats to like one person; and 3 is completely not setting someone up for success because there's unrealistic expectations, whether it's time or like output.
Huge. Again, it's like there's so much to unpack in those, and they're really effective. But knowing those blind spots, I think you're right. Every visionary would do 10 roles, and then I think be hypercritical of people as well when it's like, oh, why'd they take so long, or why are they not getting that done? One of the mistakes I did, and I still do, and Delaney catches me on it all the time, is basically like when people come in, they have their core responsibilities that you're handing over, which hopefully you've defined and systematized. I tend to get so excited about this person. I bring them into all this new stuff as well. And it's like, no, like they're running playbooks. Like, they want to get solid and set up in their own process. And I'm like, come over and do a new website with me. And Delaney's like, why are you bringing the person into that?
Yes.
So it's like,
yes,
yeah, like
exactly.
let them do, we have a rule. It's like, let them do the things that there are playbooks for. Let them run their own systems. Let them optimize that. They're optimizers, right? Now you, as the visionary, you go do all the new shit that you think is fun and shiny, because I would spanner like everyone's work week with new stuff. Basically, I'll be like, yeah,
yes, 100%. Well, I think you also touch on a great point, which is kind of actually, I guess, is like fourth point of how all the ways you can mess up in this process is assuming everyone sees life and operates and wants the same things as you. And I think that's like, there's this like humility that needs to come with like true leadership, which is not everyone wants the same things you do. And your way is not the best way. Your way is just your way. So a lot of this comes from like, hey, I would project like, hey, I want to be growth oriented. I always want to be challenged. Like, these are my values. And like, this is obviously like the way to live life. So I'm like, you also say you're growth oriented. So therefore, like, I'm going to give you 10 things all at once to do the thing. And because like, this is what I would want. And like, what I find growth orienting is actually incredibly stressful for the other person. And also, but it's not like because I'm any better. It's mostly also because like the things that they're really good at, like, for example, like actually executing something all the way through. Like, how many visionaries are really good at that? Not very many. Like, executing something all the way through, like follow through, like detail orientedness, like clear timelines, deliverables, QAing things. Like, all of those are so incredibly important to this machine running well. And they are much better at those things. And that's what they enjoy. Like, that's what they enjoy. So allow them to do that. Don't project your own values, your own desires onto someone else and assume that they want the same things. And I think that's where I'm like, I can create the container of that for leadership. That's why don't put me in management, because I'm not very good at actually executing on that day to day. But I do think that's an important like level of humility to have as you're stepping into leadership roles.
Yeah, we ended up doing, I think I wasn't super strong at that either. It's that real understand that, and that's that perception, right? Understanding your own biases, understanding your own strengths, understanding your own blind spots as a leader. So it's like, oh, that's totally me projecting. And the other thing we do a lot of profiling stuff as well, is to give them a language and give our team a language to understand each other, like our strengths, our love languages. Like, yeah, because you're not just a bunch of mini-me's, like you're a bunch of individual, unique people, and how to really bring that out. I think, yeah, it can be challenging as well to really get that like spit. Yeah, I'm sure you hear this too. The most common thing I hear when someone's like a solopreneur and like just trying to hire for the first time, they're like, I just need another me. I'm like, no, you actually do not need another you. Another you would be absolutely chaotic. Like, the business does not need another me. That would be awful. And you would get nothing done.
You would get nothing done. And the business needs less of you, actually. So there's this humility ego piece to it. Like, when I look at my relationship with Rachel, my COO, who's my right hand, she's a partner in the business. She's freaking incredible. We run off the EOS model and she handles all the day to day. We are so aligned on values and vision and philosophically what we are building. And we could not be more different. Behaviorally. She manages. She has follow through. She is detail oriented. She makes sure the process gets done and executed. And the way I kind of see our working relationship is, it's my responsibility to raise the ceiling of the business, like what's possible. She makes sure we don't die, and we don't die in this process. And like, she makes sure like we have a safety net. But you need both of those things. If we just had me, it's like, wow, there's so much abundance, there's so much like potential, but like we might die in this process. So what good is the vision? What good is the vision if you can't survive long enough to get there? I love it. But I do think that's important. It's like, you don't need another you, no matter how much you think you do.
Yeah, that's such a good insight. That is exactly what people say. Just another me, but it's like, no, someone totally different to you, someone complementary. And that's why figuring out those zones is so important, right? Those zones of genius where you can stay and where you really need to not be. Any kind of profiling tools and things will help you with that. For anyone listening, Clifton Strengths, any of doing an audit around like what gives you energy, so you can really be like honest. And I think what I'm getting from this whole conversation, and something I love from all my conversations with you, Jess, is like your humility and your humbleness that like, I am important, I am a creator, but I am also not important in some degree, right? You also have total transparency that less of you might be better, and that you have your own blind spots, and that perhaps the team need to grow without you. And like that kind of humility and humbleness, I think is really important, because often what does make us successful might be that we matter and our work's important and, we're amazing, gets us to like a certain point. And I think it's a totally different shift to actually after that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny, like when we think about, everyone's like, I want to get out of business. Like, oh, I just hate being in the weeds of the business. Well, but like, I just like want a team to do all this. So, like, that's the thing, right? It's like, I shouldn't be doing this. But also like, can your ego handle your business not needing you? Like, can you handle your team not needing you? And most of the time, the answer is actually no, but that no one wants to admit to themselves. So it's like, you don't get to earn the right to have the freedom outside of the company and do all the things that you want to do until you do the work of tackling your ego of like, no one needs you. No one wants you around. And no one needs you. You actually just get in the way. Like you actually just get in the way. Like, can you handle that?
Yeah, you're kind of annoying. No one wants you here anymore.
Yeah,
and
actually.
I think my other one was like there's people who can actually do it better than you. That's like, because I think you're like, oh yeah, like I can do it, but someone might be able to do it about as good as me. It's like, no. Actually, there's someone who can do it like a lot better.
It's like your way is not the best way. Like, yeah. And I think we touched on such a beautiful point, which is every business problem is a you problem. I'm convinced on this 100% now. It's like, if you can't get out of the day-to-day on the weeds, it's like, it's probably some ego stuff around that too. I remember like for me, one of my favorite examples of like every business problem is you problem is like at some point, I remember I was running around going like, I have cash flow problems because I have all these clients and like we're doing great work for them and the projections look really good. But like we don't have cash in the bank. So we don't have a growth problem, we have a cash flow problem. But looking back, I'm like, people were paying like 90 days post net. We had people in revenue share that we were not profitable on. I'm like, we had boundary setting issues and I wasn't asking for our needs. So I think the business is this really beautiful process of being able to reflect on areas for growth. And when you do that growth, the business naturally kind of follows from that, which is like one of the topics that we've talked on like a few different times as well. But yeah, all of it comes down to get out of the way, get out of your own way.
Yeah, get out of your own way and the business, will grow and follow, isn't it? It's like find those spots where you're hanging on, find the places you're still getting validation, find the money mindset shit, and find the truths about how you struggle to trust people and lead people. And I think, such a beautiful kind of wrap up there is that everything that's happening in your business is, and I don't think either of us say this to be spiteful or no one needs to go like, oh no, I'm the problem with everything, right? You can bring something. I love hanging out with you, Jess. It's like, it's humorous. Like, it's kind of funny. It's pretty funny. Like if you could just laugh, like that every single thing in front of you is something that's just a mirror. And I think it helps to bring humor. And I think that's something I love that you do in all that you're challenging and facing, is to kind of laugh through it, because otherwise I think you'd just be crying basically. So it is. It's funny and it's an opportunity, and amazing.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember it's all a game, and I always kind of remind my team too, especially when it's like my team cares so much about doing really great work and like really servicing our clients, and they understand the importance of the work they do in keeping businesses and jobs alive. And I think all that's incredibly important, and like the values they live by. And also, like, because of that, like when a client's upset or when a mistake happens, like, or like when someone's stressed, like there's this emotional like wave that comes up because it feels life or death. And I think in those points, it's really important to have this balance of like, yes, there's a mistake that happens. We need to see it, acknowledge it, and like fix it. And also, guys, we send emails out for e-commerce brands. No one's going to die. Like, we're not doing a surgery. No one's going to die. Like, let's take this seriously. But we don't have to have the emotional intensity to take it seriously. And I think that separation of holding yourself accountable, doing the responsible thing, doing great work, doesn't have to be also emotionally dramatic. Like, how do we separate the behavior from the emotional waves that happen? And this is a process I really had to go through personally, which is like wow, we can hold ourselves accountable and do incredible work and also not have a mental breakdown every time someone resigns or not have a mental breakdown when a client leaves, which was exact. Like I used to be a puddle of tears every
Yeah,
time any of that
that's
stuff
really
came in.
powerful. That's really powerful, that perspective, and how important it is for you to maintain that, because yeah, you're right. Like your team will respond the way that you do. And I think, yeah, you're right. Like people working for you, they want to do a great job and they will make mistakes. And who do you be as a leader about that, right? There's still standards and there's still, yeah, kind of maintaining that commitment to excellence and responsibility, but things are going to happen. And yeah, people definitely follow your lead on that. And I'm prone to that. And I'm still prone to that. It's like overreacting on things that just aren't that big of a deal. And yeah, I think it's a really good lesson. Like they're looking to you, you know, they're like, are we, okay, we're not worried about that. Okay, let's keep going.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah,
well, and it comes back to like doing it for yourself, right? So I'm like, the responsibility of the leader is how do you hold someone accountable and responsible without making them feel terrible about themselves?
Yeah.
And that can be done if it's a dance. But also, I can't do that until I was able to do it with myself because I was so hard on myself with mistakes. Like I was so hard on every failure, and I would absolutely ream myself out internally. So of course, that just gets then projected to our team. So it's like I can't represent how and do that for someone if I'm not able to do it for myself yet. And like again, that's why it always comes back to inner work. Like it always comes back to
shadow work. That's shadow work. Yeah,
that is shadow work.
Oh my gosh, what was I doing with Dee the other day? Shadow work on mediocrity, right? I was like, ugh, mediocrity makes me feel sick. People just being mediocre.
Complacency.
And he was like, you are mediocre. And I was like, I feel like I'm going to vomit. He was like, come on, say it, you know? And I was like, because it was exactly creating the same issues you just said so beautifully. It's like anything mediocre, I was getting unbelievably activated by because I was like, we're not mediocre, you know? And he's like, we're going to make
how can you believe this is okay? Yeah.
So good. Yeah. Oh, I love it. Amazing. Oh, geez, so cool. I feel like we could just talk for hours and hours, but no doubt I know that listeners will get so much value and want to be following along. So we've obviously mentioned about following on Jess Chan with 2 J's on Twitter. Is there anywhere else people can find you, Longplay Brands, and what else you're up to?
Yeah. So longplaybrands.com is going to be our website. And then Instagram for myself personally is the same handle as well. So Jess Chan with 2 J's. And those are kind of our big channels.
Awesome. Amazing. Well, thank you for being here, for being such a aware, conscious, powerful female entrepreneur and inspiration in my life. And thank you for sharing with our community today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was the best podcast to record.